Good morning, everyone, on this, I think it's a Wednesday. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Binghamton, and I don't say that very often, do I? But it's a wonderful day. Tom just went out with the dog, and we're enjoying the weather here in upstate New York. I have a little question that's kind of unusual today. When you were a little girl, what did you dream of becoming when you grew up? Did you dream of becoming a teacher because that's what people told you you should be? Did you dream of becoming a nurse because that's what someone else told you you should be? Did you dream of becoming a waitress or anything else that society kind of nudges women towards? Or did you dream of becoming an airline pilot? I bet you didn't, but I'm telling you right now here on Smart Woman Conversations with Yvonne DeVita, my special guest is an airline pilot. Erika Armstrong, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Now, ladies, let me tell you about this phenomenal woman who did not let society or anybody else tell her what to be when she grew up. I'm going to put my little trusty glasses on for this because I don't want to get it wrong. Erika, I love this opening that you have in your about where it says, "The aviation geeks shall inherit the earth and the sky above." And I guess that's a good thing. I would be all right for that.
Yes.
So as an international corporate and airline pilot and captain, a published author and screenplay, an editor and writer for 7 national aviation magazines, including, are these the magazines, Aviation Professor? No, you're an aviation professor at MSU Denver. How do you do all this? And director of instructional design and VP of business development for Advanced Aircrew Academy. Gosh, Erika has learned diverse and complicated skills. More importantly, she understands the power of integrity, leadership, crew resource management, strength of character, and this is great, the intelligence of humor. We don't think of humor as having an intelligence. I really like that.
Yeah.
Right. During her 30 years in aviation, she has worked in all aspects of the industry, from the friendly front desk CSR of a busy FBO. You can tell us what that means. I don't know what an FBO is.
Okay.
To the captain's seat of a Boeing 727. She's experienced everything in between. She's passionate about the aviation industry and amazed at how it has changed the world. The other thing that she's done, there's a little bit more in her bio, which you can find on LinkedIn, but the other thing I really want to talk about, she does articles on Plane and Pilot, Colorado Serenity Magazine, Mountain Connection, and several others, but she also has this book. So this is how I met Erika. I went to a book signing for A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. And Erika, going back to that, let's start a little bit with the concept of all the things that you've done relating to being an airline pilot and this passion you have for being in the cockpit, not necessarily back in the seats. And then you wrote a book. Those are 2 diverse things. How do we get from one to the other?
Actually, oddly, it was an easy transition because as you were saying, a lot of women don't think about becoming a pilot growing up. And ironically, I was one of those people. So I never even thought about becoming a pilot when I was growing up. I distinctly remember as being a child of hearing about Amelia Earhart. She's our #1 female icon, right? Well, in my 6, 7, 8-year-old brain, in my mind, she disappeared into the ocean. And so, I mean, who would want to follow into those footsteps, right? So on some low level, that idea that our icon disappeared sits in the back of little girls' minds and, you know, kind of deters us from that idea. So I didn't know any women pilots growing up. I'd never met one, never even thought about it. So I kind of became a pilot by accident. I was in college and I was a journalist. I was studying journalism, so there's the thread that connects those 2 together. I loved writing. I loved sharing stories and the power of words and to make somebody actually have an emotional reaction to words. There's so much power in that, so I loved that. And especially right now, you look at how much in need the world is of having pure journalism, right? So I was working 2 jobs, and I still didn't have enough to pay my tuition and rent. So I was just trying to find a third job to fit in with the schedule. And of course, airports and aviation are 24/7, 365. So I found a position it's called an FBO. It's a fixed base operator. And all it is the facilities at a general aviation airport or any airport where you can take your airplane, get fuel, all the line services, hangar, catering, rental cars, all that. So there was an opening at the front desk there, and I took it just because it fit into my schedule and my hours. And it was so overwhelming with the information I needed to know. So I ran the switchboard, and there was 35 incoming lines or distribution of lines, and I think there's 12 incoming lines, and you'd be all by yourself trying to answer and get the phone calls out. But in between that, I didn't even know aviation had its own phonetic alphabet. It was something as simple as that you had to learn. And then the pilots would call in on the Unicom asking for services, or they'd give us notifications that they were on their way, they wanted a rental car ready for them. And so I just started learning the lingo, the language, meeting the people, and just seeing the camaraderie in the aviation industry. And the best part is at 5 o'clock, all the suits, we called them the suits, everybody, they go home, and then we were in charge of the airport pretty much until like 10, 11 o'clock at night. So at night, when we were doing our paperwork, that's when the line guys would start sharing their stories about learning how to fly, all their adventures, what they were doing out there. And I got to know these guys, and no offense, but they weren't rocket scientists. So I'm thinking if they can do it, I can do it. So it just took a moment, and takes a moment just for all of us to have that one moment to think, wait, maybe I can do this. So I took that one little thought, and then there was at the FBO next door, they had flight training over there. So I finagled some trading, bartering some time, and I got a flight lesson. And then the strange thing is there was a brand new flight instructor over there, and it was a woman. They'd never had a woman flight instructor over there, and I happened to walk in at the same time with serendipity. And so she got me she trained me for my private pilot's license. And 7 or 8 years later, we got hired at the same company, and I was her captain on the 727, and she was my flight engineer and the first officer. So.
And you talk about that in the book.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So journalism and writing was kind of a first thing that you did, and then you got interested in this whole going up in the sky thing.
Right.
Was it something that you suddenly felt, I really want to do this? Or was it one of those things where some of us are on one path and we see, well, there's this other path over here and I could do that and it makes more money, so I'll do it. But it isn't like, I've really got to go do that. Was this something you really had to do?
At first it wasn't. I mean, it was terrifying, and feels like there's so much to learn, because I'm now back in the teaching environment. So I've got brand new students coming in, and it's just amazing how much knowledge you have to get into your brain, but you just take a little bit at a time. But I tell you what, the very first flight, so when you go to a flight school, they'll do an introductory or discovery flight, and they actually let you fly the airplane. And the moment that my hand was on that yoke, and I started realizing I could do this, and they let you, go through a landing and everything, I was hooked. There's something that shifts in your brain, and that desire enters your heart, and it's so thrilling, and you just want to be up there, and you all of a sudden get that desire to fly higher and faster and new equipment, and it's definitely an addiction that gets started.
I've heard, I have a couple of friends who fly planes, not the big planes that you have flown, but they fly, and they say that it's kind of that kind of addiction. I don't know, maybe it's the same kind that runners get when they run or something. I'm not sure. I guess I can relate to it from the perspective of when I'm deep into writing one of my books.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Get in the groove.
Yep, I'm in the groove, and I'm like, this is what I was meant to do, and wow, I'm so happy and glad that I'm doing it. But it isn't an overnight thing to become a pilot. I mean, right. You said you had those 7 years you just talked about, but there's more to it even than that.
Right. most people don't realize, even airline pilots, every 6 months, if you're a captain, every 6 months you have to go back for training and check rides. You have to go get your flight physical. There's all these things on the side in the background. So even when you're not flying, aviation dominates your life. I mean, you have to, take care of yourself, be ready for a drug test at any time. It's not just a job where you go and you leave and then you walk away from it. It stays with you every single moment of the day. So it's either you're all in or all out kind of industry.
But tell us a little bit about, now you live in Colorado, and that's where we got to meet. And Colorado still has a place in my heart, even though I'm in upstate New York. But you were able to choose to live in Colorado, is that correct?
I was. So when I lived in Minnesota, I was flying for a company that they would sell me out. They would sell me to other flight departments. That sounds weird, huh? But they would sell my pilot services. So there's a gentleman who bought a Citation 550, and he needed pilots for it, and he happened to buy a home in Telluride. So when I lived in Minnesota, every weekend I used to get to fly out to Telluride and spend the weekend in Shangri-La. I'm a Flatlander, Minnesota. I love Minnesota, but my goodness, I came into Telluride for the first time and it took my breath away. So I kind of knew I wanted to head out that way. And then when I was flying for the airlines, I got based in Minneapolis, Detroit, Dallas, St. Louis, Las Vegas, back to Minneapolis. And they finally opened a base in Denver. It was a temporary base. They opened it up, and then a few months later, they shut it down. And then about a year later, they opened it up again, and I had the opportunity to fly captain out of Denver because it was a junior base. I hopped on that opportunity in 2000, and I never left. So I moved there, and I still love it here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I have been to your home, and it's wonderful. And so let's go a little bit now into the book.
Okay.
Because the book is both the story of Erika becoming a pilot, which some of the stories that you share, they'll make people laugh, and they'll also make people, other women go, but that's life. We've all been through it in one way or another, although it seems to me from having read your book, you went through a little bit more than many of us. But the book is also about you. And it's also, from my perspective, it's also an inspirational story about how women can overcome these challenges and setbacks, and maybe we'll say bad decisions in their life, because we all make them. So talk to us about A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air, and start with the story of how you got the title, because that's my favorite part.
Well, there's a particular incident. The Chick in the Cockpit, it was definitely, kind of a thumbing to the name of a cockpit, right? And the definition and tone behind that. But there's a story in there where I was the captain on a flight. We were doing a red eye. The first officer was doing the landing, and he just pounded that thing on. But it's still the captain's responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen, and totally on me for not catching it. He had a perfect approach, and he just forgot to flare, and I just was so slow and tired that I just didn't catch it. But anyways, we pounded on, it was a bad landing, and we had a drunk passenger because we were coming from Las Vegas, and so we were teasing with the passengers. We had the door open, and we were the flight attendants were offering free back massages for anyone who needed a back readjustment. And anyways, we had a inebriated gentleman come up front and was horrified to see that there was a chick in the cockpit who made that god-awful landing. So he didn't know it was my first officer.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's part of life, those little funny stories. If you can learn to realize that 5 years from now, this is going to be a funny story, I can tell people, even though right at the moment it's like, really, but to your point, Erika, it looks like we lost you. Are you still there? Can you hear me? Uh-oh. I think we buzzed off a little bit. Maybe one of our internet connections is, but you're back. Okay. And basically where I was going is that, making fun of things that happen to you, because the reality is, nobody's life is perfect. And you did own up that you were the captain, so you should have been more aware of how things were going, perhaps. I mean, I'm not a pilot, I don't know, but you know, and so in any other instance, if you're the one in charge, you take the responsibility. But it is a funny story. I really enjoyed it. It did bring the title back to, you know, oh, this is what we're really talking about here. We're talking about women achieving certain things in life that are new and different, because there aren't very many women pilots out there. Are there? I mean, there's more now.
We're about 5% in the airline world.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's really tiny if we think about it. So the rest of the book talks about your life in general and the life of a woman who is building both a family and a career. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of women watching will relate to that. Many women are perfectly happy being stay-at-home moms. I was a stay-at-home mom for 15 years, loved every minute of it. But I do enjoy being an entrepreneur now. And I'm blessed because I don't have small children to care for. And Tom is very supportive, but it isn't always that way. So you shared in your book some challenges and things that had happened to you. What was the purpose for doing that part of the book and really kind of bearing your soul to the world?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons, and most people don't realize when they read the book exactly what the book is going to be about. We kind of did that on purpose because that's how things happen in your world, right? No matter who you are, no matter what it is, you're going to have some sort of challenge that you weren't expecting. So the idea behind the book was to show how a woman can have a challenge and not self-destruct. Mm-hmm. Even some of my favorite books I love, like Wild and Eat, Pray, Love. I love those stories. But if you look at the core of it, you're watching women that are self-destructing, doing, because something bad happens, they destroy themselves. So I wanted to give readers another opportunity to look at it and say, okay, this person worked really hard and some jerk in her life took everything away. So how can you get over that? What can you do? So it's just my example of what happened and how I was able to, I still had my whole entire goal of life taken away from me, but how to get beyond that and still soar higher without what that goal is in your life.
Yeah, so you kind of rose from the ashes, and they really were ashes.
Right.
Because yes, this person had taken so much from you, and I think a lot of women can relate to that. However, it's so hard. It's so hard to stand up and keep going. It's so easy to just get by.
It is.
And this is what I tell people. Yeah. You don't want to just get by, because there's so much out there for you and there's so much you could be doing. Where did you get that? Where did you get up in the morning and say, no, this is not what I'm going to be. This is not who I am. I'm going to continue. How did you do it?
For me, it was my kids. I'm adopted myself, so maybe it views my view of the world and having kids is a little bit different. So they were my motivation to get out of bed every morning. Right now we're watching a society where we're just putting pressure on all the women out there to lean in and do this job thing, and I was definitely doing it. Man, I was leaning so far over. I just tipped myself over. And we have this idea that we can do it all, and you're expected to be able to do it all. That's a pile of crap. Really, it really is. So every person's situation is going to be different. So you're going to have to learn what your own balance is. No more of this leaning in. Stand up straight. Whatever feels good, standing up straight. If that means staying home with your kids, do it. Don't worry about anybody else or what they're saying. I have friends that still work full time and they've got nannies, and they do whatever they need to do to get that balance. So my advice is don't take advice.
Yeah, well, there you go. Don't take advice. Well, the interesting thing though is that we're kind of giving advice not to take advice, but the reality is you have to know you have to know not just you, but take some time to look at some goals and some desires that you have, some passions that you have. So I think women can be a stay-at-home mom, and even that term needs an update somehow, because it doesn't mean what we want it to mean. I mean, it's 50 years old and it's useless. But you can be the mom, you can take care of the kids, you can have the husband in the house, and where your hobby or passion might be something fulfilling to you that you want to maybe turn into a small business, absolutely go for it. Understanding, correct? Understanding that, as you said earlier, you can't do everything. You can't have it all. What are you going to give up, or how are you going to balance this? Because for the most part, we love to say, we folks here in America, that family comes first. Yeah. And while family does come first, if they call you to pilot a plane when it's not your regular time, how often can you say, no, I can't?
Right. So the reality is, for me, for someone in aviation, and I mean, feminists out there will just cringle at this, but you really have to have a good spouse and partner if you want to be in aviation and have the whole shebang, all the kids and the house and the family. You really need to have that strong partner in your life that can handle it. When you know, if you have a mechanical, I've had mechanical situations where they make me stay with the airplane and I'm 3 days late coming from home or getting home. So it truly is a unique situation. And all of us will find that what makes us happy changes over a lifetime, right? So what makes me happy in my 20s is going to change. And I think sometimes we cling to that original goal and idea, and we think there's something wrong with us now if we're not happy doing what we're doing. And we have to just listen to that internal talk and say, okay, you know, what my passion was before, it has changed, and then that's okay. So you're going to have to do re-evaluations, especially with major life changes, you know, marriage, kids, even moving. Look at you moving across the country again. So, and it takes time. You know, you're going to have those up and downs as you try to level it off. But
it does, yeah. and it's not easy, and it's but it's the recognition. So if we can leave people with a message today, it's, you know, get in touch with yourself and don't be so hard on yourself. Exactly what you said. I understand that, because many years ago, I was going to say how many, and I'm not going to say how many, but many years ago, I was going to be this famous author. I was going to write novels, and I did. I wrote several novels that I don't know where they are today, but the point being, I was a writer. And I have since come to see that I can get back to my novels now that I have more time. But in the meantime, I wrote a lot. I built a successful blog community, and blogging is writing. People were reading it. I've written ebooks, and when, you know, listening to what you're saying, I'm thinking, you know, I did okay. Mm-hmm. And I should be happy. And I am happy. But it's easy not to be. It's easy to say, okay, well, I've made this success, but it isn't what I wanted, so it's bad. It's not right. But it is right.
Yeah, it is right.
And we should. I mean, women, did you find, this is all part of the same conversation, but it's a little kind of moving in another direction. Did you find it difficult to stand up for yourself? Because in the business you're in, 5% women, that's a whole lot of men. And even today, there are a lot of men like that drunk who was upset about the chick in the cockpit. How do you stand up for yourself?
Yeah, that definitely is takes time to get to that point. When I first started flying, and especially when I got to the airline world, and you're on reserve, so every time you walk in the cockpit, it's a brand new crew, brand new dynamic. And I had the extra special opportunity of flying in a 727, and there's 3 pilots in there. There's a flight engineer, first officer, and a captain. So the dynamics were different every time. I'd say of all the people I ever flew with, there's maybe only about 15% of them are true misogynists. You'll find, if you look beyond that they are just jerks in general. And you have to remind yourself that it's not just you, it's just now they've decided to latch onto that thing. My goal was to teach them that if I made a mistake, it was because I made a mistake, not because I was a woman. So I think especially when I made it to the captain seat, and I no longer had to prove myself. I made it up to that seat, damn it. And so that every seat upgrade brings you a whole new level of confidence. So no matter what you're doing in your industry, no man or woman, when we first begin, when we're not encompassing all the information, we don't know everything, we are afraid to stand up and speak up. But as you move along in your career and you're gaining more knowledge, that's when you learn to step up and say, what's right or wrong. So yeah.
So do you as a woman have to kind of teach yourself to stand aside and say, this is me as a pilot, this is not me as a woman. I'm a pilot and I'm responding as a pilot, and how they react is up to them, but this is me as a, so does it work that way? Is that how you do it?
I had to start to learn not to care. I can't tell you how many times I was called a bitch because I was doing my job.
Yeah.
And I learned that if I was being called that, I was probably doing my job. I learned what worked for me. I learned, especially from watching as a flight engineer, watching flight crews interact, and what worked and what didn't. But I found in me that if I was just transparent, told them exactly what we're doing, I did my job, and I did it with some fun and humor. Especially now that I'm training pilots and I'm watching and understanding how pilots learn. All of us in an emergency, what's the first thing that happens? We get tunnel vision. Happens to all of us, right? So we have to train that out of pilots and how to open up our field of vision and take it all in. And that one little moment of a little bit of humor will take that blinder off of somebody who's dealing with an emergency, especially in the cockpit. We can have something happen and we get so focused on what that problem is. If we are able to break that tension just a moment so that we can allow ourselves to realize everything that is good in the airplane, what's working. If I have an engine running and I can figure out my attitude, that's all I need, right? So if you can change your whole view of the world during any emergency to open it up to look at what's working and not just focus on the problem, you'll have a whole different mindset than if you just are wallowing in just that one problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're coming to the end of our talk today, but I want to hear more about the screenplay and the next book.
Okay. Yeah, definitely working on the screenplay. That's a whole other industry that I'm learning about and working on. I did have a movie studio company, inquire and ask about it. So we're still kind of going back and forth, but there's all sorts of politics and stuff in there, and that's not my wheelhouse. So I'm learning that. Book 2, just like you, man, I'm working those 2 jobs right now. So to find my creative time has been really frustrating. I had a drunk driver hit me in March.
Oh, no.
Yes, and so I've lost the hearing in my left ear, and it's been replaced with this weird ringing tinnitus thing. Your brain kind of fills that gap with the ringing.
I have tinnitus.
You know? Okay.
Yeah.
So mine was a sudden hearing loss and sudden tinnitus, so I've been just trying to deal with that. So for me, just like you, it's those moments of quiet writing I love, but now it's a challenge for me because when it gets quiet is when I notice that ringing. So I'm learning how to.
People wonder why I have the TV on almost all the time.
There it is. Yeah.
I do it so that it takes away from the noise. And the funny thing about that, I feel so bad for you because I literally think I have had this all my life.
Oh.
I thought that's what silence was.
Oh.
And I don't know when in the 10 years ago or so I realized, no, this stuff in my ears is not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But it can be very difficult when you're, and so I play the radio, but I can't play the radio if I'm writing new stuff because I need my brain for that.
Right.
So I agree. It can get to be quite challenging.
Yeah.
But that's very exciting. So the possibility, writing a screenplay, yes, that is a whole different thing than writing a novel or anything else. I am in awe that you're doing that among all the other things that you do. But you gotta move on. You have an opportunity. You got to do what you can to take advantage of it. And I just see that so many women kind of shy away from something that looks like it's too hard when give it a try. If it isn't for you, it isn't for you, but at least give it a try. See what's there.
Okay.
And I would love to see a Chick in the Cockpit in the theaters, because it would be awesome. I mean, the whole humor part, while the story has its moments of tension and I don't know what the word is I want to think of right now. It's just chock full of this wanting to strangle somebody. There's also a lot of humor. You do have humor. You do know how to use humor in an intelligent way. I really love that. So I'm going to recommend people get the book Beyond. Don't look at it as, oh, it's a book about how to be a pilot. It is not, folks. It is really not. I will write more about what it is in the blog post. Okay. So Erika, this has been phenomenal.
Oh.
You just have so much going on. You're quite a good role model. And I want women to see that life's challenges are things that you can work through. There are ways to do it. And let's say now, as much as we don't want to be running around giving everybody advice, the reality I want to leave them with is talk to somebody.
Yes.
There are people to talk to. I'm here to talk to you if you like, but always think about, well, who can I talk to? Because whether it's a problem or an idea or just a conversation you want to have, there are other women willing to talk to you and help you work through it.
Yes, anybody experiencing domestic violence is welcome to email me. I've got my email address all over social media. I get an email about once a week, so please reach out. I know for me it was really hard to do. Yes. It truly is the hardest thing to do. You wouldn't think so, but please reach out to somebody.
Yes, I mean it is. So many things you're thinking you're alone and you're not. So we want to leave people with that message, and I want to hear more. I will make sure that everyone knows more about you and about the book and about where to reach you on the blog post. And maybe in a few months down the road, we can do this again and talk about the screenplay and when the movie's coming out. Let's hope.
Yes.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.